They never called it forbidden. They didn't need to. Because the most powerful methods are never hidden behind walls. They are hidden behind difficulty. The Japanese understood something modern men have forgotten. An unbreakable mind is not built through confidence, not through affirmations, and not through motivation. It is built through removal. Removal of hesitation, removal of emotional dependence, removal of the need to feel ready. This method was not written for the masses. It was lived by warriors who accepted one truth early, that the mind breaks long before the body does. Bushido was never a philosophy meant to comfort you. It was designed to strip you. Strip excuses, strip softness, strip the illusion that you are special. This is stillness and direction. If you are here looking for motivation, this path will disappoint you. But if you are here to build something that cannot be shaken, stay. And if this way of thinking resonates with you, like the video and subscribe, not for entertainment, but so you remain connected when the world tries to pull you back into noise. In feudal Japan, young men entered training believing strength lived in the sword. They believed mastery came from repetition alone. Their teachers did not rush to correct them. Because the first thing that must be broken is the belief that effort equals discipline. The Bushido method began before combat, before forms, before strikes. It began in the space where most men collapse, the moment of decision. A warrior was taught to act before the mind could negotiate, not because thought was weak, but because hesitation was deadly. Modern men treat hesitation as intelligence. They call it planning, they call it caution, they call it patience. The Japanese called it decay. Because every delay strengthens weakness, every pause gives fear time to speak. Bushido demanded immediacy. If the decision was made, the body moved. No emotional agreement required, no internal debate allowed. This is why the method feels forbidden today, because it removes choice at the moment most men cling to it. A man who must feel ready will never be ready. A man who waits for clarity will die waiting. The Bushido-trained mind moved first and allowed understanding to follow. This was not recklessness, it was precision. They trained the beginning of action, the first step, the first breath, the first movement out of stillness. Because whoever controls the beginning controls the outcome. Most men fail their lives the same way they fail their days. They hesitate, they negotiate, they wait for the perfect condition. The Japanese warrior woke knowing this. Today does not care how you feel, and neither does death. This method was not taught openly because it cannot survive half commitment. Either you apply it completely or it exposes you. That is why it was passed quietly, from master to student, from silence to action. And once learned, it could not be unlearned, because a man who can command himself cannot be ruled by circumstance. This is only the surface of Bushido. The disciplines ahead go deeper into emotion, pain, focus, isolation, and mortality itself. But without this foundation, the rest will destroy you. The mind must be forged before it can be trusted.
The second lesson of Bushido was never taught with words. It was taught through exposure. The Japanese warrior was not trained to eliminate emotion. That idea came much later, from men who misunderstood strength. Bushido did not aim to make men emotionless. It aimed to make them uncontrolled by emotion. There is a difference. Fear was expected. Anger was natural. Pain was guaranteed. What was unacceptable was obedience to any of them. A young warrior was placed in situations designed to provoke reaction, not comfort, not fairness, reaction. Insults were delivered deliberately. Disrespect was manufactured. Silence was used as a weapon. The master watched closely. Not the face, not the words, the movement. because emotion always reveals itself in the body first. A tightening jaw, a shift in weight, a rushed breath. These were failures, not moral failures, functional ones. Bushido understood a brutal truth. An emotional man is a predictable man. Anger makes you rush. Fear makes you freeze. Pride makes you overreach. Predictable men die early. So the warrior was taught something unnatural: to feel fully and move independently. Emotion was treated like weather. It could rage, it could pass, but it never decided direction. This discipline was trained relentlessly. A warrior would stand in posture while insults were spoken directly into his face. His body ordered not to respond, not to suppress, but to remain. The mind screamed. The ego demanded defense. The body stayed still. This was not passive, it was dominant restraint. Bushido believed that the man who reacts has already surrendered control. Modern men are taught the opposite. They are told to express, to release, to act it out. Bushido saw this as weakness disguised as honesty, because expression without command is just leakage. The warrior learned to let emotion exist without granting it authority. Fear could speak. Anger could burn, but the hands moved only when commanded by principle. This is why Bushido warriors appeared calm in moments that broke other men, not because they felt nothing, but because feeling did not lead. They understood that clarity cannot coexist with emotional urgency. Clarity requires stillness, and stillness is trained. The modern mind is constantly pulled outward. Messages, noise, opinions, each one demanding reaction. Bushido demanded the opposite: silence under pressure, slowness under provocation, precision under chaos. A warrior who mastered this discipline could walk through insult, fear, and uncertainty without deviation. Not frozen, not detached, directed. This discipline was considered dangerous because a man who is no longer controlled by emotion cannot be manipulated. He cannot be rushed into decisions. He cannot be baited into mistakes. He cannot be destabilized by criticism or praise. Such a man becomes difficult to govern. That is why this method faded. Modern systems require emotional men, reactive men, men who move when provoked. Bushido produced men who moved only when necessary. The discipline of emotional sovereignty was not about becoming cold. It was about becoming exact. The blade does not strike because it is angry. It strikes because it is aligned. Without this discipline, the remaining lessons collapse because pain will come, isolation will follow, and death will eventually appear. Only a man who owns his internal state can stand unbroken when those moments arrive. Bushido did not promise comfort. It promised control, and control begins here.
The third discipline of Bushido confronted a lie most men protect at all costs: that action requires desire. The Japanese warrior was taught early that this belief destroys more lives than fear ever could. Desire is unreliable. It arrives late, it leaves early, and it disappears the moment conditions turn hostile. Bushido did not build warriors who waited to want to act. It built warriors who acted despite not wanting to. Training began before dawn, not because mornings were sacred, but because resistance lived there. The body was stiff. The mind was dull. Warmth tempted stillness. That was the point. The master did not ask how the student felt. Feeling was irrelevant. The command was simple: move. This discipline was known quietly as action without emotional consent. Not forced action, not reckless action, commanded action. The warrior learned that the body is not the decision maker. The mind is not the decision maker. Principle is. Once the principle was chosen, execution followed immediately. Modern men live in reverse. They check their mood. They wait for energy. They look for alignment. Bushido saw this as surrender, because a man who requires desire is owned by circumstances. When desire is absent, he collapses. When motivation fades, he delays. When life becomes heavy, he negotiates. The warrior trained to remove desire from the equation entirely, not to kill joy, but to prevent dependence. Musashi trained when he was tired. He practiced strikes when his hands bled. He wrote philosophy when his body wanted sleep. Not because suffering was virtuous, but because reliability was. The body learned something important: that movement does not require permission. After months of this discipline, the internal debate weakened. The question, "Do I feel like it?" stopped appearing. Action became mechanical, clean, undramatic. This terrified observers, because most men rely on emotion as justification. Without it, there is no excuse. Bushido knew that freedom comes from obligation to one's own command. The warrior did not feel disciplined. He was disciplined. Desire became a bonus, not a requirement. When desire appeared, action was easier. When it disappeared, action continued. This created something modern culture rarely produces: consistency. Not intense effort followed by collapse. Not bursts of productivity followed by guilt. Daily, unremarkable execution. The samurai understood that mastery is not built in moments of passion. It is built in moments of reluctance. Every time the warrior acted without desire, he weakened the voice that asked for comfort. That voice never fully dies. Bushido did not seek its death. It sought its obedience. By the end of this training, the warrior no longer identified with resistance. Resistance became noise, background interference. Action cut through it. This is why Bushido produced men who could endure famine, exile, and solitude without breaking, because they were never waiting to feel ready. They moved because movement was required. This discipline was dangerous to teach openly, because a man who acts without desire cannot be delayed by boredom, doubt, or discouragement. He becomes difficult to stop. In systems that rely on hesitation cannot survive men like that. Without this discipline, the next lessons would fail, because pain will strip desire away completely, and isolation will remove encouragement. Only a man trained to act without wanting to can remain standing when both arrive. Bushido was not preparing men for ideal days. It was preparing them for days that offered nothing and demanded everything. The fourth discipline of Bushido did not begin with training. It began with subtraction. The Japanese warrior was taught something modern men resist instinctively. Strength is not built only by adding more. It is forged by removing what weakens you. Before a warrior was trusted with responsibility, his master examined his life, not his skill, not his victories, his attachments. Extra possessions, unnecessary comforts, excess words, idle habits, each one was treated as weight. The samurai believed the mind fractures not because it lacks strength, but because it carries too much. Every attachment demands protection. Every comfort demands repetition. Every identity demands maintenance. and under pressure, maintenance becomes distraction. Musashi lived with almost nothing: one sword, simple clothing, food enough to survive, not because he glorified poverty, but because simplicity removed hesitation. A man who owns little moves quickly. A man who identifies with little thinks clearly. Bushido required warriors to examine their lives with brutality. What drains focus? What softens resolve? What creates dependency? These things were not negotiated with. They were removed. Not at once, but permanently. The warrior learned that excess creates noise. Noise creates confusion. Confusion creates delay. And delay is death. Modern men are taught the opposite: accumulate more, consume more, express more, explain more. Bushido taught restraint, silence instead of explanation, stillness instead of reaction, necessity instead of indulgence. This discipline extended beyond possessions. Speech was restricted, idle conversation was discouraged, complaints were eliminated entirely, not because emotion was forbidden, but because wasted energy was. The warrior learned to ask one question before keeping anything in his life: does this sharpen me or dull me? If it dulled him, it was cut away. Friends who weakened resolve were left behind. Habits that softened discipline were abandoned. Stories that preserved victimhood were discarded. This process was uncomfortable because most men confuse identity with accumulation. They believe removing things means losing themselves. Bushido revealed the opposite. With less to protect, the warrior became calmer. With fewer roles to perform, he became precise. With fewer distractions, his presence deepened. He stopped leaking attention, and attention is power. This discipline was considered dangerous because a man with little to lose cannot be controlled by threat. A man who does not seek comfort cannot be bribed with ease. A man who does not chase validation cannot be steered by opinion. Bushido created men who were internally sovereign, not rebellious, not defiant, independent. The fourth discipline did not make life smaller, it made it sharper. When unnecessary weight was removed, what remained was purpose, and purpose does not tolerate clutter. The warrior did not remove everything, he removed everything unessential. What remained was enough, enough to train, enough to fight, enough to remain. This discipline prepared the warrior for what came next, because once external weight is gone, internal weakness becomes visible. Pain cannot be avoided, discomfort cannot be escaped, and the next lesson would demand that the warrior stop running from both.
The fifth discipline of Bushido confronted the instinct every man carries from birth, the instinct to escape discomfort. Pain arrived early in a warrior's life, not as punishment, as instruction. A strike taken too late, a stance held too long, a night spent hungry, cold, and awake. When pain appeared, the master did not rush to remove it. He watched, because pain reveals truth faster than comfort ever could. The Japanese warrior was taught something most men never learn. Pain is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Pain is honest. It does not manipulate. It does not deceive. It simply informs. The body tightens. The breath shortens. The mind searches for exits. Bushido trained the warrior to stay, not to dramatize pain, not to glorify it, but to remain present inside it. A wounded warrior was ordered to sit, not to distract, not to complain, not to narrate suffering, just to observe. This was not endurance for pride. It was endurance for clarity. Because a man who cannot stay with pain will betray his principles to avoid it. He will choose shortcuts. He will abandon discipline. He will rationalize retreat. The samurai understood this deeply. Musashi fought duels injured. He trained while exhausted. He wrote philosophy while isolated. Not because pain made him great, but because fleeing pain would have made him small. Bushido did not teach men to seek suffering. It taught them to stop running. There is a difference. Modern culture numbs pain instantly. Distraction, medication, noise. Bushido removed distractions. Silence was the classroom. The warrior learned that pain peaks, then changes. It does not stay the same. When observed without resistance, it loses authority. The body still hurts, but the mind stops panicking. This separation was critical, because in battle, panic kills faster than wounds. A warrior who can remain calm inside pain can still think, can still see, can still act. This discipline was practiced daily. Cold water, long holds, extended stillness. Not to punish the body, but to train the mind's relationship with discomfort. After months of this practice, something shifted. Pain stopped being a signal to quit. It became background information. The warrior did not enjoy it. He respected it. Modern men confuse comfort with safety. Bushido taught that safety comes from competence under pressure. A man who collapses at discomfort will collapse at crisis. A man who can endure without escape becomes stable, unmovable. This discipline terrified those who observed it, because a man who does not flee pain cannot be controlled through fear. He cannot be rushed, he cannot be intimidated, he cannot be softened. Bushido was never designed for peace. It was designed for reality. And reality does not remove pain for you. It asks one question instead: will you remain? The warrior learned to answer without words, by staying. This discipline prepared him for the final lesson, because pain attacks the body, but fear attacks the future. And the final discipline would require facing that directly.
The final discipline of Bushido was never taught early, not because it was secret, but because an unprepared mind would break under its weight. Only after a warrior had mastered action without desire, emotion without obedience, simplicity without loss, and pain without escape was he brought to the edge of this truth. Death is not coming later, it is already present. The Japanese warrior was taught to accept this daily, not to become morbid, not to invite fear, but to destroy hesitation forever. A master would take the student to a cliff edge. Below, nothing but stone and finality. Look, he would say. The lesson was not about dying. It was about ending negotiation with life. Because every excuse is rooted in the belief that there will be time later. Later to act, later to change, later to become serious. Bushido removed later. The warrior woke each morning acknowledging one thing: this could be the last. Not spoken aloud, not dramatized, accepted. This acceptance did something profound. Procrastination collapsed, fear weakened, decisions sharpened. When death is accepted, every lesser fear loses authority. The samurai understood that a man who fears death cannot live fully. He will hesitate, he will compromise, he will choose comfort over truth. But a man who has already accepted death has nothing left to bargain with. From this acceptance came the final command: hold the line. Not when it is easy, not when support is guaranteed, not when retreat would be forgiven. Hold it when everything inside you demands escape. In battle, this meant standing ground when outnumbered. In life, it meant remaining disciplined when no one was watching, when progress was invisible, when effort felt unrewarded. The samurai believed that identity is revealed at the breaking point, not in victory, not in praise, but in resistance. Musashi held the line repeatedly, outnumbered, underestimated, exhausted. He did not rush, he did not retreat, he remained. This is what Bushido was always preparing the warrior for. Not success, not recognition, but unbreakability. A man who accepts death daily does not flinch at discomfort, does not beg for approval, does not abandon the path when it becomes quiet. He continues. Modern men are trained to quit silently, to disengage politely, to disappear when effort costs too much. Bushido trained men to remain visible to themselves, even when no one else cared, especially then. The final discipline was not dramatic. It was simple. Do not retreat from your principles. Do not abandon your standards. Do not step back when standing is difficult. Hold the line. Because what you do when it costs the most reveals who you truly are. This is why Bushido created men who could not be shaken by circumstance. Their strength was not loud, not emotional, not dependent. It was internal, daily, silent, and once forged, it could not be taken away. This path was never meant for everyone. It demands too much honesty, too much responsibility, too much permanence. But for those who walk it, there is no confusion, only direction, only stillness, only the line held.